What's good, everybody in Chicago? This is Kahlief here. This is a very special Earth Day episode of Spawn on Me, featuring two of the founders of a new company called Cleanplay, which is looking to offset and help you offset some of your energy consumption and helping to bridge the gap between clean energy and what you get a chance to do every day in your favorite hobby in video games. So check out our cool interview with those folks right here, and we'll be back right after this. Hey everybody in Spawn on Me land, we have a fantastic and awesome conversation for all of you. Today, I get the chance to sit with two legends of the space, Richard Hellman and David Helgelson. I get a chance to hang out with you two gents because not only is it fantastic to see you both, Richard, seeing you again for the second time, and David for the first time, and get a chance to grill you about your lives and experiences about all the things, but also get a chance to talk about your new venture in Cleanplay, something that I got a chance to get a small smidgen of information about at GDC, but now we get a chance to kind of talk about that a little bit longer and a little bit more. Richard and David, thank you so much for joining me. How are you both doing, gents?
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm excellent.
Again, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I think I am super familiar with both of your work and the kind of the info and work you all have done in this space for such a long time. But for our audience who may not necessarily be as familiar, Richard, I know you have a long, fantastic career in the space. You know, you've worked over at creating Madden, you've worked at EA, all of these amazing places over your years. And David, most folks, I think, definitely know your work as one of the founders and the founder of Unity. Where did Cleanplay come from? Where was the concept for this born? What was the kind of initial reasoning while you two gents said, hey, we're going to get in a room, we're going to hang out and talk about what the future of games and the environment and the environmental toll is kind of coming together? What was that conversation like?
So maybe I'll start with my story, but it's really two stories coming together.
Sure.
In my case, I'd kind of stumbled into founding what was supposed to be a game company in the very early days, but became Unity, a software company for video game development. Really proud of the work we did there. I was one of the three founders. I was CEO for 12 years, and then handed that off to other people. And it's a really cool company. I'm proud of the work we did there. After stepping out as CEO, I kind of got obsessed about my it was an old worry of mine, climate, which I had kind of been ignoring because I was really busy with Unity. But I got back to it, and I started thinking about the climate, and I started thinking about what we could do about it. And there's technical solutions, and there's solar power, and all this stuff, and policy, and activism, and I have respect for all these things. But all I know is technology and to some level games. So I had the hunch that there had to be a way of leveraging the fact that just short of every second human is a gamer, and a lot of those gamers care about the environment and care about climate, and was there a way to build a community around that idea? So it's kind of the let's say half the story, or my story. And then, Richard happens to be an old friend of mine, sometimes mentor. But anyway, sorry, Richard, you should tell your story.
I always get overrated on those stories, but that's all right. Thank you very much. I think my journey here is that I worked at Electronic Arts off and on for 33 years or something like that. And then I did a tour at Amazon Games, and I spent a lot of time in the games business. A part of what I ended up doing was spending a lot of time understanding how various hardware worked, various systems. And as a result, I ended up learning a lot more about things like power and energy, probably than I would have otherwise. And then, Kahlief, I had this other job once upon a time, which is I've only been in two industries since I graduated from high school, this one and the nuclear weapons business, which is completely obvious that's where I would come from.
But where we got a talent from.
Yeah, exactly. I worked at a place called the Nevada Test Site. But while I was there, I saw some of the absolute state-of-the-art solar installations. I saw state-of-the-art batteries being created. I saw an aluminum oxygen battery in 1980, which is crazy. I drove an electric car in 1980. So those were all
Well, Richard
kinds
was
of.
building electric cars since the 90s
Yeah, well,
himself.
it inspired me to build my own later. We can have that conversation if you like later.
Yeah.
But it, the net effect for me is that the concept of energy and its utilization kind of was a part of every job I've ever done in a backwards, sideways kind of way. And the last real big project I did for EA was to work on a streaming gaming project. Anybody who has spent any time around the streaming gaming business very quickly discovers that the entire financial health of the business is based on your ability to access power at a reasonable price, because it's the single largest component of the cost. And of course, that gave me a window into how much power is used by video games in various contexts. So I kind of came to this with that understanding. And David came to me and basically said two things that were interesting. One of them is, don't you think the video game business should be carbon neutral? To me, that's like mom and apple pie, obvious. But the other thing he said is, don't you think that we should be a model for how other industries should solve this problem? And to me, that was a powerful idea. And some of this is, in 1983, when I worked in the business, I would have to get something fixed. I would have to call up a company on the telephone. And inevitably, I would lose 15 minutes explaining to them that there was a video game business, that actually people got paid to do that job, and that it was really something. So for me, my perspective is a little warped. I didn't notice when there were suddenly 3 billion of us. I just didn't notice. And when you think about the change that we can produce based on the audience that we have today, and the fact that probably the most likely correlation to gamer is voter and bill payer, you start to recognize that we have a tremendous amount of untapped influence potential that could really solve some real world problems. The other thing I do know about gamers is that virtually anything I've ever taught them in a game, they have attempted to apply in real life. And sometimes sometimes it's a good thing. When I watch a particular football play from the Denver Broncos from the 1990s, it's like, wait a minute, I know where that came from, which is awesome. But then again, I've seen those Mario Kart drivers too. So there are upsides and downsides. What we believe, I think what David and I both believe, is that once gamers understand that power equals carbon and they can do something about it, that a lot of them will choose to do that. And they'll not only choose to do it in their gaming life, but in the rest of their life too. So that's the horsepower of this idea. That's the leverage that we think that we get. And that's how we got started.
I think one of the most interesting parts of the concept and the execution of what you're all looking to do and are doing is, one, it is that education layer, which I think is super important for the player, which is something that I think is, in my various jobs that I've worked in the video game industry, that is one of the hardest parts, is kind of teaching the player not only, not just through tutorials, but understanding of like what the business is, but also trying to figure out good ways to not only give them that immediate crystallized version of like, this is the one-to-one experience that you should have, that is helping you not only either have fun, learn something, or kind of be in community with people that you know and love and care about. For Cleanplay, besides the kind of nuts and bolts of how things work for you as a company, how are you all thinking about that extra layer of educating an audience that oftentimes still is trying to figure out where their connection to the platform and the understanding of the art form matches their day to day? You talked a little bit about the kind of energy to carbon conversation, but what other things are you all thinking about in terms of the education and lift for the audience that you're trying to gather and community you're trying to gather?
You want to go, David, or should I?
You go, Richard.
So the answer is, we have to do a lot of things. When I make the joke, I never learned much in game design except what didn't work. I have lots of stories about what doesn't work. What I can tell you is, high scores are high scores for a reason. They give the player a real focus to apply the various solution sets that they want to within the game, and you're defining success in a way that we have in common. And so high scores are important. In our case, making people understand, first, the energy that they use, and then secondly, the carbon that produces, are those two key high scores that we need to get across to people. We're going to do that in lots of ways. One of them is the easiest and most forward way. Every time you open the application, the lower left-hand corner shows you how many kilowatts hours of power we think you've utilized since you've been a member. And that gives you visibility on kind of a day-to-day basis of what that power looks like. Number two is, for those who care, we have ways to help them understand how to convert that to carbon in their particular case. But power turns out to be a good start. So we spend a lot of time getting people focused on that power problem. We will do both things that are obvious on the front page of the application, but one of the things that we think is powerful is to have events that our members can participate in. So I'm going to tell you about one of my favorite ideas that we haven't done yet, and I don't have a direct plan, and if somebody steals it, good. But one of the ideas I have, going back to the time I spent at Amazon, I helped run a Twitch channel there where we would run events that had both celebrities and good gamers in them. And one of the ideas that we had that we never got to do was I wanted to run a game where it was run in teams. One guy played the game, and the other guy rode an exercise bicycle that powered the game. And that when the guy died who was playing the game, he had to get on the bike. And they swapped back and forth. And what I knew was a couple things. Number one is people had never thought about video games in that way. So how hard you actually have to bike to get the thing to run would have been pretty funny. People would have worked pretty hard. Mm-hmm. Number two is they're not gonna want to die in the game anymore. They're not gonna get on the bike. So for us, having an event that we can sponsor or be a part of that has an exhibit like that for the customer in a context that they understand. If we're playing a game that they understand and suddenly they translate that to, holy crap, that's like riding a bike uphill at full speed as hard as I can the whole time. Now I have a very real sense, a tangible, experiential sense of what that power is. We're going to need to do a lot of those things. We're going to need to do that in the context of the games they play. We're going to need to do that in the context of their real life. And we're also going to need to give them credit for the carbon abatement choices that they're already making. And so I think by getting them focused on a single high score, which is how much power they spend on gaming, and getting more precise and more specific about that over time, we think that we educate them in the three-dimensional way that lets them apply that in the real world.
I love that. And also, I need that as a person who is very sedentary and who loves donuts. I may need to
we're to the age where you got to take care of yourself, I'm afraid. We both are.
Brother, I'm trying. This is nothing but carbon at this point. I need to offset all of this in multiple ways that I possibly can. David, I want to hear your thoughts about not only, I love what Richard talked about, it kind of the nuts and bolts parts of, what is the participant doing who is, engaging with Cleanplay and putting that app on their PlayStation and starting that process. One of the things that really stood out to me was the conversation that we had at GDC around how you're partnering with companies who are helping to offset and be those environmental partners in those ways. David, I'd love to hear your thoughts about how has that process been for both of you, and what has that looked like in terms of, again, you're not only having to pitch yourselves as a new company and introduce yourselves in those ways, but the gap between the folks who are working in the middle of the country who are building solar farms and them potentially being like, well, we don't know necessarily what video games can do at this point. What has been the conversation that you and the team have been having with those folks on the ground?
Sure. So, I mean, what's really cool is that the industry is run by kind of its founders and people who are, pretty young and, have been making games. So, those people actually understand the climate crisis and understand that, the planet is a pretty precious thing to take care of. All these companies want to do something good. And we think Cleanplay is like a way to get them together and collaborate on that. So a simple offering to gamers, a couple of bucks per month, you subscribe inside the app. In return, the game companies will give you all kinds of cool items and unlocks. And we will ensure that you're playing on clean power in the background. And that's a really cool loop that, a lot of the game companies are very excited to join.
Yeah. And go ahead, Richard.
I think you I think you asked a different question. So I'm gonna lead your answer and give it back to David because he's actually an expert of what you asked.
Sure. Sure.
So in our first incarnation, we have a couple of things that the users can choose that we do on their behalf. One of them is a new solar installation in upstate Minnesota right now in a place called Brainerd. And if you've seen Fargo, you know where Brainerd is. And it's actually run by a collection of farmers who built it in a co-op, the way that farmers have been building co-ops for 150 years in America. In this case, it's a power co-op, but rather than building a gas-fired power plant, they built a solar installation. And so what we're doing is we're providing some of the funding that makes that possible. The other thing that we've done is we have invested in a windmill in Oklahoma that had been
the gamers are.
The gamers are. These are the first two choices we've offered. The other choice in Oklahoma is a wind farm that actually had been decommissioned. And we're helping, along with the customers, pay to get that brought back online. It is key for us to focus on additionality. One of the things David was doing before we started is he runs a fund that's very focused on solutions in this space. And he has been a source of insight for us about how to do that. We have a collection of other ideas that are coming up. Some middle schools in Northern California. There's a peanut farmer in South Carolina who's changing from being a peanut farmer to a solar energy provider. There are some storage providers that are very interesting to us that don't fit into the normal space, but in places that have high amounts of solar energy, like California, storage is what makes us green when the sun goes down. And so we have a lot of those solutions. David has been working on lots of other ones that are not only about energy, but also about managing the carbon problem and the damage that's already been done. I'll let him talk more about those because many of those are really interesting.
Well, let me rephrase.
Yeah, sorry,
let me rephrase because I think one of the points that I think when I am understanding not only the ideas of what you're all trying to do, but I think of this also as a connection to infrastructure, especially here in the States. That I think a lot of folks, if you're at home and you're thinking about, what is the kind of future of the country in a lot of different ways. One of the big things that folks have been trying to kind of galvanize around has been, we're looking to figure out different avenues for jobs, for construction, for all of these additional things that are so essential to the way that we as a company continue to move and grow. And it sounds like in an interesting kind of roundabout way, Cleanplay is helping to facilitate not only the ideas from innovators and entrepreneurs and lots of folks who are in the climate space, but also this is also a potential connection to kind of helping grow future infrastructure for the country in those ways by connecting to organizations and companies that are starting to think outside the box and also giving that benefit to the country and to then the world with the energy needs that we are constantly kind of moving forward with and are going to need more with. David, does that feel like a conversation that you're having when you're discussing the potential partners that you may have? The way, how are you thinking about sourcing those things? Are you looking at very specific problems from the research that you've done and saying, all right, we know that deforestation is a huge issue and maybe we can help in that respect. We know the oceans need help in terms of cleaning up, bad spots when you have not only just natural, human interaction with things, but then when accidents happen, oil spills and all those other kinds of things. How do we figure out ways? Are you thinking about the partners that you bring on as very specific solutions to very specific problems, or is an overarching philosophy of we just want to do good and find people who are doing that good and help to facilitate what they're trying to do?
Well, I think it's all about enabling the gamers who actually want to do something good, and then connecting them with these solutions. And of course, the solutions are going to be different at different times in different parts of the world. Because often the gamers are going to be interested in something that's local or relevant to them. But bringing a really big community together gives them so much power in having this positive effect.
Can I amplify that just a little bit?
Please.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're doing. I think we're dragging a portion of the gaming industry and the industry that's responsible for the power that drives them much closer together. Meaning we're trying the number one thing we're trying to do is to give customers information to make good decisions. And that what we think is true about gamers is if you give them the right kind of information, they make good decisions, like all the time. And they make them in a really clear way, and they know how to communicate them to each other. And so for the most part, there are a lot of people working on very interesting solutions to these problems. And very few customers are aware of what they're doing at all. They're not aware of the problem, and they're not aware of the solution. What we're trying to do is to be a conduit for that to happen and to reward them for that. For doing that, I think one of your questions was, what are the solution set guys think about us doing this? I think we're the weirdest creatures in the room, dude.
Right.
They're like, so we're fascinating creatures to them, and the video game business is very interesting to them. As an example, if you want to get the attention of the power business, I simply have the following conversation. The PlayStation 5 alone, by itself, represents $5 billion of retail power per year. You want to get the attention of somebody in the power business? Have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it winds up being, I think a lot of folks think of, and I think there's a lot of hope in the conversations that I think a lot of us have through the work that we do that is kind of beneficial to the world, right? Like our show is a space that we talk about, you know, not only conversations like this, but it was founded on a baseline conversation of how do we up level the conversation around diversity in games, right? How do we kind of bring people together and have a discussion about like who are the folks making things and who are the folks who are having those experiences. And I think the work that you all are doing is doing the exact thing in that space, while also giving players a benefit that they can tangibly understand, right? Right? It's like I can get some version of, you know, with the partners that you're all working with, you know, like the NBA 2Ks and you know, other folks on the top spin side, you know, two games that I love, and understand that like there are tangible things in those games that I want that will help me and kind of move me along in the games that I play. But also, I also then get a chance to help and do some good in the world in those ways. What's been some of the conversations that you've had directly with any players that you might, you know, folks who are in that space who are like, I'm raising my hand and I want to be a part of this. I want to help you along in your cause. You know, have you had any early feedback from folks in kind of understandings of, you know, are they getting it? Are they understanding the crystallized version of what that is? Or does it feel like still a space where, you know, a lot of explanation is happening about all of the pieces working together? Because, you know, I think the biggest analog that I remember, we had this conversation, Richard, during GDC, was I remember there, you know, during the PlayStation 3 era, there was the folding at home moment. And there was a big conversation around everyone, you know, leaving their machine on for, you know, hours and days on end because they were like, we're going to help, you know, crush cancer. This is a very different version of that. But it feels like the analog is very, very understandable instantly. For the feedback that you have gotten from players, what has it been like so far?
Yeah, we have a little harder problem.
Yeah.
Because we have to teach people kind of 2 or 3 different things as opposed to just one. In that case, it's like leave your machine on and help us cure cancer is a really simple message. We kind of have a 3-step message, and that makes it a little harder. That being said, we have customers who show up. You know, great thing about video gamers is they're all different. But we have folks who show up who understand the problem, who understand that they have a role in solving that problem, and appreciate that we exist because we didn't exist before and they had new avenues. In other words, they have already learned the lessons that we want them to learn, and we simply were the solution set for them. And that's not a small number. For us, with almost no, we had surprisingly high traffic numbers for somebody who did no PR and no advertising of a product in a store with, you know, 60,000 of my best friends. So what I would say is true is that there is some latent in that 50 million PlayStation 5 customer base. There's a fair collection of people who get it and want to do something about it. That's group 1. Group 2 there's a bunch of people who are playing Top Spin or PGA Tour golf and go, if I spend this much money, I get that thing that would cost more than that. I'll do that. Right. And I've met those people. There are a lot of those, turns out, like a whole lot.
Raising my hand.
And then there are some people who are genuinely skeptical about what we're doing or have seen greenwashing activities. And we have to earn their credibility with transparency and continuity of effort. And then there there's just haters. There are some of those, and they're going to say what they're going to say. They're not going to financially participate in the process, and they're probably not going to be a part of the sub community. That being said, when I have the right event or I have the right asset, they'll probably show up for that game. So what I think is true is that we realize that all of them are different. They're at different places in that journey of understanding, and that we have to help each one of them at each one of those stages. I would say we haven't seen any surprises at all, except to the positive, meaning that we've had more kind of organic support than we expected to get out of that market on launch.
That's rad. That's cool, because I think one of the the understandings I think a lot of people have is like, this is not an easy thing as a venture to kind of start. It is a difficult understanding to bridge the gap. You have a lot of folks who are, let's be honest and fair, there's a lot of people who still think the earth is flat. So you have a lot of discussions that you're trying to bridge across a vast amount of players across the planet. But I love what you said, Richard, about the, like, how do you make the case to corporate in those ways, right? Like, I used to think a lot of the ways you do good in the space was a hearts and minds conversation, and I quickly understood that was not the case. It then became
I have to make them more money. I have to make them more money.
1,000%. You have to figure out a way. It's a weird understanding that you have to kind of get it, but we talked a little bit before we started of, like, once you've worked in corporate, you understand what that means in a real way. You have to hit someone's bottom line to make them care in those ways. So I appreciate the fact that the honesty and transparency is there of, like, doing good is not sometimes a free venture. It is in lots of different ways. Like, people are doing good for the world and good for the planet in so many ways every day, but this is a easy understanding way for folks to be able to do that work as soon as they boot up their console. David, I know one of the things that I asked earlier when we had a conversation at GDC was, like, PlayStation is a early partner with you all to kind of do that work in that space. Are you all thinking about what this looks like to potentially expand the venturing to kind of what do we want to do in terms of platform, and how are we thinking about partnerships with other folks in the space?
PlayStation has been a great launch partner. They're super supportive of us and great to work with. But no, we want to take this to the rest of the gaming community on all the other platforms, as well as the open platforms. Yeah,
it winds up being something where I think this is a put your money where your mouth is conversation, for a lot of companies. I think we've heard, over the years, a lot of teams talk about sustainability and figuring out good ways to make the carbon footprint smaller for everything that we do. We've seen some very smart innovations on the tech side, and from the, even from the software side of putting your consoles asleep and giving you more,
big difference, huge difference.
Yeah, huge difference in terms of, like, how much TDP you're kind of putting out and all this kind of stuff. What has been some surprises that you have found while doing this work about how rough it is in terms of climate change, in terms of where we are? And, we have a lot of discussions around.
Yeah, this is going to sound, I'm going to tell you something that's the opposite of what you think.
Sure. And I love that. Please.
So a couple things here. You kind of talked about it before. One part of the power of what we're up to is that we're telling individual gamers that they have the ability to make good decisions about this that make a real difference.
Yeah.
And they don't have to wait for politicians to do it for them. And the way I describe it is we're trying to dispense of the gatekeepers of good. And so to the greatest extent possible, we're trying to distribute that power as democratically, in small d definition of that word, to as many customers as possible, believing that gets to the best outcome. It also is the best antidote to the politics of the moment. Because consumer choice is one of the things that both political parties actually agree on, and that if what we do is ask our members to exert their opinion and express it through consumer choice, that's a pretty defensible mechanism, and one that's easy to make last. The other thing that David and I did was, early on we had discussions about, are we an NGO? Because one of the early concepts was maybe we should just be holding the industry's feet to the fire. And a couple of things were true. Both of us have worked in NGOs. I hate NGOs. You raise money all the time. That's all you do. I hate raising money. That's like the worst part of the job. So to me, that was true. And number two is you're not sustainable. So in order to be sustainably ecologically, you have to be sustainable economically. And what we believe is customers will participate in that process to make that possible. What I think we have discovered in talking to almost every single partner we've talked to, whether it's a game publisher or a platform holder or a power provider, is that we have provided an innovative and in a new way for them to express what they already believe in. So when we go to EA and we ask them, would they like to be a part of this project, as long as we can make it so that they also make some more money, they have a lot of people in that organization who want to do the right thing. And we're just making it easier for them to do that. And I think that we're seeing the same thing on the platform side and on the power provider side, is that we're just a mechanism that they didn't have before to reach more people and to do more good. And as a result, we're getting, remarkable support from everybody. I worked with Sony off and on for 30 years. And I don't want to overstate this, but I have seen a bunch of tangible outcome-oriented things they have done for this project that I've just never seen before. And so I'm going to take that as good news, and we're going to accept their gracious support, and we're going to try and be worthy of it.
What is I want to dig a little bit deeper because we're almost out of time, but I think the conversation about community always pops up in my mind, right? Like, I think to galvanize folks through the, perfect is the enemy of good version of where we're trying to go. It takes a little bit of movement for people to kind of understand and go together and do that work. But I love the fact that this is a very, in a weird way, very individualized thing that you can just like do, and you're still part of the collective in those ways. What are you thinking about? Again, it's still early on for you and the rest of the team of like getting people in the door and getting them to understand what this is and all of those things. When you think about the community that you're potentially building with this, what does that look like for you all moving down the line? Is that a thing where you're like, you talked about not wanting to be an NGO, which I don't think anybody wants to do, but like, I think there's a layer of that, and we see it in charity in games a lot. You see it with the ways that players and gamers and content creators are always galvanizing around, events and ideas and themes that they care about. What does this look like for you in the future, kind of thinking forward facing about what do you want community to kind of look like in this space for you all?
Well, David,
I mean, as we grow this community from thousands to hundreds of thousands and millions, I think the gamers can be the most powerful force on earth, and we can do a lot. And when you have let's say millions or even tens of millions of people acting together, each person doesn't have to push very hard to have a lot of output, and that's where I get really excited. And when I was talking about this early on with Richard, just realizing how many gamers there really are, and we're in every part of every geography on Earth, and every demography has gamers, and we should be pushing, and we can.
It's almost
he's absolutely right. I can't believe where we have people who have downloaded this application. Let me add. Yeah, it's like literally they even have internet service there. Anyway, there are two things that I think are really interesting about this. So one of them is that we started with the assumption that gamers would be an interesting force of leverage and that they could produce interesting long-term change. Just a piece of kind of simple math. Our goal, David's and my original goal, and continues to be our goal, is to erase the carbon footprint of the gaming business. We're starting with the PlayStation 5. But some relatively simple math. If we get to a 10% market penetration on that platform, and then 10% of that 10%, that is 1%, 5 million of the PlayStation 5 customers, take their homes to be solar oriented to zero carbon that weren't before, on the day that happens, we have erased the carbon footprint of the PlayStation 5 console business. On that day. That's pretty powerful. One of the other things we're extremely interested in is the notion of turning our customers into providers. So in other words, not just that a customer who joins Cleanplay pays into Cleanplay, but maybe when they put those new solar cells on their home, they signed up to be a VPPA that we contracted with. And so the three other guys that they play Call of Duty with are members and are actually on their and have actually sponsored their VPPA. That is the ultimate close of the loop, because now what's happening is the community is simply servicing itself, driving to a greater good, using the economics at 2 orders of magnitude leverage to make that happen. That seems incredibly powerful. When the community starts working with itself to achieve the outcomes that it cares about, even at very small numbers, those numbers are so leveraged, the multiplication is enormous.
And for folks at home who don't know what VPPA is, could you explain that really quick?
Sorry, Virtual Power Provider Association. It's a mechanism that allows companies that are accumulating clean power to sell those rights on a long-term basis in the market space. And it is one of the mechanisms that companies use to erase their carbon footprint.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like that would be really cool. It's like, hey, our clan in COD, we are a power provider for.
We're a power company,
right?
Yes. My read is the average. That's literally what it is. The average household in America could service between 20 and 50 players, depending on the platform and circumstance. So you could, you'd go to the PlayStation, you go to our app, the Cleanplay application, and one of the selections would be the guy that you play Call of Duty with standing out in front of his house. And we just think that's incredibly powerful. We think the more that it's a face that you can put with that, we're looking at a middle school in Northern California. And my joke is, I want the class. Take a picture of the class out in front of the building, because I know that will work.
Yeah.
I want to take care of Mrs. Winky's first grade class. I'm in. Can I buy more than one? I love Mrs. Winky. What I know is that people make emotional connections even through technology.
Oh yeah.
And that they kind of crave that in a way. And so what I believe is true is that if we make being good a social experience for the people involved, it will create long-term real good, and they will internalize the message in a way that will influence the rest of their lives.
I think that's a perfect spot to end this conversation. But I think the first thing I go into all of these conversations is like, I'm in. I'm down to help. I'm one of the folks who's always and constantly trying to figure out good ways to connect with good people who are trying to do something better for the world. And it sounds like you're already off to a really good start with Cleanplay and everything you're kind of working on in those conversations. And also, I want to build a VPPA and then turn people's turn my competitors'
exactly
spaces into more places to be able to generate power. It's an actual power play in a real way.
Yeah, the Spawn on Me VPPA.
That would be rad. Idea. That would be awesome. I would love that.
Coming to you from the power plant.
Let's get it done.
Right? Let's figure out a way to make something like that happen. I love that. That's brilliant. Gents, I wanted to thank you again for spending some time with me this morning. It is always great. I love having smart conversations around games and technology. You gents are doing something extremely cool, and I'm wishing you the best on your venture. And let's please keep in contact. I want to figure out good ways that we can partner up and do some good work together. Any ways that I can be of help to kind of move the conversation along and see where things are moving. I'd love to be a part of that in any possible way. So, Richard, David, thank you so much for being here with me today. Go check out Cleanplay. Where can you go check out more information about everything you're doing?
So at www.cleanplay.com is a website. And then if you are a PlayStation 5 owner, we are on the PlayStation
store.
The application is free. And then once you've made your selection about the subscription style that you want, that's where those commercial decisions are made.
Love it. All right, everybody at Spawn on Me and everybody back in Chicago, everybody hanging out, watching the show and getting into all the goodness that we're talking about. Please give these gents some of your love. Go check out the work that they're doing. And please go check out the app. Make sure you're being a part of the conversation and helping the world get a little bit better, a little bit cleaner, and also, earn some goodies in some of those games you've been playing. And also, you can't beat me in top spin.
We didn't talk enough about the goodies.
Yeah.
I can't.
Thanks, man.
I can't. I'm no good.
Yeah, I'm taking on all competitors now. I'm saying it right now.
No. The very first work. The very first just to tell you how bad I am, the very, very first Madden tournament, I came in dead last. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Hey, we all have our things that we are good at. You
I make the instrument. I don't play it.
Hey, knowing is half the battle. Everyone G.I. Joeing it up. We get it. Thank you,
Nice to
gents,
see you again.
Always good to see you, David.
Thanks.
So good to meet you, and hopefully this will not be the
Super
last
pleasure.
time we
Thank
get a
you.
chance to hang out and chat. Everybody at home, we're going to
sure
take a
not.
quick break, and we'll talk to you right after this. That was a great conversation. It was really cool to be able to hang out with David and Richard about all the cool initiatives and innovations that they're bringing to the space. It's very cool to see Sony get on board with this and hoping that other teams do as well. You can go to cleanplay.com and go check out more of the work that they're doing there, and then figure out some dope ways to get connected and help the earth get a little bit cleaner with the gaming that you get a chance to play every day. So massive love to the team for coming on the show and hanging out with me and getting a chance to talk about all the goodies they are working on. So mad love to you all. Treat the earth a little bit better today, especially because it's Earth Day. And we'll see you soon with more Spawn and Me. Peace.